basketball breakdown show. Myself, Zack Geoghegan. I'm joined here by Brandon Ramsey, as always, our film room coach. He's got all the basketball expertise that we need. We're going to do a little bit of Clemson film breakdown in today's episode. For those who don't know, Kentucky dropped their first game of the season on Tuesday in a game that lasted about 6.5 hours. Stephen Peak, who's behind the scenes right now producing, he and Jack Pilgrim actually went down to that game. Apparently, they are not too accommodating to media members. Stephen, if you have any weird stories, you can pop in and share for that. But Kentucky did not fare very well in that game. The offense struggled. I think they had pretty much season lows in every single shooting stat. It was field goals, three-pointers, free throw percentage. All were season lows. Season low in points, 66. The next lowest was 11 against Duke. So it was kind of just a slow slugfest coming into in this game, and Kentucky ended up losing 70-66. There was definitely some causes for, I don't know if concern is the right word, but some question marks coming out of that game. A lot of it kind of revolving around things like post-ups from the bigs, particularly Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison. Lamont Butler got injured a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about that and his status for the Gonzaga game on Saturday. But we've got 3 different plays queued up here for today's episode from the Clemson game. We're going to do some good and bad, I guess. So we're going to start out with some good stuff of what we saw. We're going to focus on a couple different areas that Brandon over here has really pinpointed from his film study. And a lot of it has to deal with Kentucky started with a 9-0 run, and Clemson would follow with a 10-0 run. So Kentucky's 9-0 run in it was like late-ish or middle-ish first half. These were really the only 2 like real big runs of the game. Kentucky's 9-0 run followed by Clemson's 10-0 run. We're going to kind of compare and contrast just a couple of plays from each of those segments and see what just the major differences were from how Kentucky was scoring at will to just suddenly not scoring at all. And then we'll dip in a little bit to kind of the post-up situation with Amari Williams and how that has just not exactly been a favorable situation for Kentucky, and it's just not worked out well. And maybe it's a 10% thing, and the 10% is we'll figure. I'll explain more about what that 10% means going forward. But we'll go ahead and I'll stop yapping here. Brandon, let me go ahead and move our floating heads here to the top, and we will queue up. Oh, there we go, right there. And we will go ahead and dive into our first play here. I'll set the scene for a second. Obviously, we're at 19-23. Kentucky is trailing here. This is where Kentucky starts their 9-0 run, forces Clemson into a timeout, and a lot of it starts right here with just a very kind of simple, nothing too spectacular about this play. It just revolves around Amari Williams doing what he does best, operate at the top of the key. This is one of the good Amari plays that we're going to talk about, where he doesn't do too much, but is still the hub of the offense. He's still the focus of this play. And it's just this very simple handoff. You've got Lamont Butler cutting. The defender doesn't really know what to do. He has to choose. He chooses wrong, so he gets cut, or he gets delayed just a little bit to get stuck behind the Amari Williams screen, which pops open Jackson Robinson for a wide open 3. Boom, you've got 2 shooters on the corner to help space things out as well. Brandon, let's go through this play. Take us from the beginning. Why was this the play that you decided to start us off with today?
Yeah, so the great thing about this play, compared to some of the things that we'll show you here coming up, is that there's early ball movement, player movement, and just some pace to the way that Kentucky is moving around. This is a called set play coming off of a pair of free throws from Clemson. So as Ian Shefflin was shooting those, Coach Pope's calling this play in to Lamont Butler and the Wildcats to run this time down as they sort of need to get something going offensively. They need to get a bucket here. So they turn to something that is either going to get them a layup at the rim on the back screen or a 3 for one of their best shooters in Jackson Robinson. They end up hitting Amari Williams here at the top of the key. I will talk about that in just a second. But we start here with a back screen being set by Jackson Robinson. The thing that makes this so effective is that teams are going to be very hesitant to help back towards the rim off of Jackson Robinson because he's such a dangerous shooter. Clemson here ends up getting screened well enough that they actually just switch the action. Number 7, who was guarding Jackson Robinson, then takes Lamont Butler. But Zachary here, number 11, he's just a step
Not
late.
This Zachary, by the way.
Yes.
Different Zachary.
He recognizes the switch just a little bit late, so he takes kind of that one step in still towards the basket, and that gives Jackson Robinson the space he needs to come off of this handoff. Again, Zachary taking that step in, um, forces him sort of to go up through or underneath the handoff, which is kind of a no go when you're guarding Jackson Robinson. You would rather chase that to make it harder for him to shoot it. He settles behind, gets a really clean look, and knocks it in. For Amari Williams here, something I've harped on a lot for a couple games now. He is a very good initiator of offense from the catch. When he has to dribble into this top of the key spot and then initiate offense off of the dribble, it's much more difficult for him. Obviously, there's nothing that hard about essentially handing the ball off to Jackson Robinson, but it still just goes to show the difference in his skill set where he's very good at, taking two dribbles into a handoff, or he can take two dribbles, hit somebody on a wing and run into a ball screen. When he's operating east and west, I think he's a really good facilitator and a really good passer, again, especially from the catch. When he's asked to dribble the ball down the floor and operate from the top of the key as if he's the point guard, then it becomes very difficult for him. So I thought this was a really good set play. I think it'll be interesting to see going forward. Does Coach Mark Pope turn to a few more set plays, especially when the going gets tough for Kentucky offensively, when they get bogged down a little bit? Could you see him make more called set plays as opposed to just kind of letting the offense flow through some other issues? I think that'll be something to watch for as the schedule gets tougher, but certainly great execution here to get one of your best players a clean look, and Jackson Robinson knocks in the three.
Yeah, it's just like you said, just highlights how effective Amari can be. And Clemson clearly realizes that Amari is a great passer because look how tight they stick to Lamont Butler on his cut there. And you even see number 7 looking back. He kind of senses that, okay, Amari, as he's liable to make that pass, he can make that pass. We've seen him make that pass before. Brand, we all three of us, you, myself, and Steven, were kind of having a conversation last night through text just about, and I even brought it up, why not just maybe do more actual post-ups for Amari as opposed to him kind of pounding it into the paint? We can just quickly touch on that and tell me why you think that you would just rather maybe have Amari continue to kind of stack himself up top of the key there.
I think a lot of it comes down to if you post up Amari Williams on the block, there's two things that would have to happen. One, he's going to have to become a more willing passer out of the post. That's something that I've been a little disappointed in because he did that. If you go back and watch him at Drexel, which I realized not a lot of people besides me probably did, but he was a good, like he would whip it across the court to the weak side with his left hand and do some things out of the post. We haven't seen that to this point, but I think then bigger picture, when you think about Kentucky's offense so far this season, what's been so good about it? It's been the space and the ability for players to drive to the basket without somebody being in their way. Think about Lamont Butler, even against Clemson. Lamont Butler early turned the corner a couple times and scored it at the rim. Otega Oweh is very good at beating his man one-on-one along the baseline or from the wing, wherever it may be, and getting in there. Jackson Robinson shooting that floater that we saw several times recently. Those things happen because there's so much space in the paint and at the rim. If you start to put a post-up guy, whether it's Amari Williams, Brandon Garrison, Andrew Carr, whoever it may be, anytime there's somebody on the block, that's an extra defender and your own guy that's kind of in the way as you drive it. So can that be a part of the offense? Absolutely. And we saw to a small degree of success throwing it inside late in this game. Even, Amari even scored it a couple times in the post late. But I think that overall for the free flowing offense, for the zoom actions, the namesake of this show, all that sort of stuff to work, I do think that you need to keep everybody out to the perimeter as much as possible. And again, it's about having Amari Williams play to his strengths on the perimeter. He is tailor-made to run this offense and initiate this offense from the 5 spot. He just needs to do it a little bit differently than he has been, and that's probably what we're going to talk about a little bit more here in one of these next plays.
Yeah, and as you said just a few minutes ago, you were talking about how he kind of can assert himself to act more of a point guard in terms of wanting to actually drive and maybe assert himself a little bit too much. That was the 10%, the extra 10% that I referenced there at the beginning. That was something that Brandon kind of has brought up a couple times through our text threads and on KS Board and on Twitter. Just that extra 10% is him trying to just do a little bit too much out of for reasons that really aren't necessary. And like Brandon said, we'll talk about that a little bit more here soon. But this right here is a perfect, like this is kind of more what you want to see from Amari. Just more simple stuff like make the clean reads, use your body to be big and set big screens because he's huge. He's the biggest guy out there. So it's very easy for him to just kind of knock guys off their block, even though he has had a couple of, I would say some of his offensive fouls have been questionable in terms of his sliding because you could probably call an offensive foul on like every other screen. Um, but yeah, so this was a great play. And I would like to back up and just say I'm a huge Mari Williams fan. I think he's been awesome this year. I think there are times where the extra 10% that we talk about just kind of gets him in trouble, and that's pretty much where all of his 100% of his turnovers come from, that extra 10% of being a little bit too much. But he's been awesome for Kentucky this year. He was great in that last 10 minutes against the Clemson game of being able to keep them alive, scoring within the paint. Once he gets outside of 5 feet, his basketball skills for some reason just kind of vanish. But when he's inside and rebounding and being very aggressive, he's been awesome. So I just wanted to point that out because I think we do pile on Amari a little bit. Some of it's for good reason, and we're about to do it here in a few minutes. But we'll go ahead and move on to play number 2 here, which we're going to now shift to the start of Clemson's 10-0 run. And this ends up being a really kind of a devastating run because I think they end up they take the lead after this play. Obviously, they end up going up by 7 into the second half, and then it takes Kentucky some time to catch back up. And Clemson has one more, final blow there at the end to kind of put Kentucky away. So this was really, that 10-0 run was really, I think that was, Evan Maya said that was Kentucky's first kill shot allowed all season long. So the first time all season Kentucky has allowed a 10-0 run, and it proved to be very fatal in this game. So it's really just kind of a simple, I'll just quickly go through it here. It's not much to it. Otega Owe had just kind of scored. I think he scored just once on the 9-0 run, Brandon? Or was
he scored twice? He picked the pocket of Chase Hunter up at the top of the key and went and dunked it. And then so that was points 6 and 7 of the 9-0 run. And then he had honestly a drive not completely dissimilar to this one, where he was on the left-hand side and kind of shot a floater back with his right hand. So he had a fast break dunk and sort of a transition floater to extend that 9-0 run for Kentucky.
And that floater was a tough shot. Like he was going left, like going away from the basket, shot it over to the right. So at this point, even after, I think Clemson had called timeout, so maybe out of this, he was still kind of feeling himself, obviously. But he feels himself a little too much here. As this play kind of develops, you see Jackson cut through. Otega immediately notices that baseline is kind of opening up. There's a lot of space down there. He tries to beat his man off the dribble. It just doesn't happen. He dribbles himself into a triple team, essentially. There's guys open here on the side. You might want to see a little bit better spacing, but Jackson that's a viable pass there if he can make it. I'm not sure if Otega can or not, but he just forces up a bad shot here. Clemson turns it the other way, and they spark their 10-0 run. So Brandon, take us into the mind of Coach Ramsey here and tell us what you see.
So first and foremost, after the game, there was some talk about isolation ball, some hero ball. This is exactly what we're talking about. Otega Owe had scored the last 2 offensive baskets for Kentucky. I believe the possession before this, Clemson had just made a 3. I think it was good old Jaden Zachary again who made one to end Kentucky's 9-0 run, and then now made it 28-26. But Owe had made the last 2 baskets, so he, like Zach said, he's fueling himself a little bit. But this is not Kentucky basketball, at least not Kentucky basketball under Coach Pope.
Not this year.
It's not one-on-one isolation. It's not hero ball. It's not I'm going to get mine. And we had just a little bit of that creep in on Tuesday where, Otega sees an opportunity here. He has a whole side of the floor to play off of. Like, there's nothing wrong. In fact, I want him to try to drive this, like probe in there and see what you have. But then after a couple dribbles, like his shoulders aren't past Chase Hunter's here. There's no reason to really continue this drive. He should either, just kind of take it down to the baseline, maybe see if you have a drift pass to Kirk Kriisa here. You could just circle it back out. I mean, right here, Brandon Garrison's setting a little bit of a screen for Kobe Brea. Like Kobe Brea could come fill this space, and we could hit him here with a pass, or we could just dribble it back out and live to fight another day. But, like I said to Zach earlier, like this is a play where like the number of players in the world that can make this sort of play is like it's LeBron James, and that's about it. Where like I can just decide I'm at 30 feet right now. I'm going to take 2 dribbles, pick my dribble up, do a little Euro step, and just be bigger than everybody else. Like, Jake always a great player. He's really good one-on-one, but he's not this good one-on-one where he can just bully his way to the basket. One little thing here I would like to see, a little bit of an opening here, a little 45 cut by Jackson Robinson, I think could have been really effective here just to kind of become more available for Oweh. Like if he cuts there, maybe you get a pass from Oweh. Like I said, also, I think, Garrison really was trying to screen for Kobe and he just kind of stood there for whatever reason and was watching. So that's something we'll mention that one more time. But for people clamoring for more Kobe Bryant shots, some of that's on him, folks. It just is. And like I said, we'll talk more about that later. But Kentucky had their most isolation possessions per synergy of the season against Clemson. I don't think that it's a coincidence that it was also Kentucky's worst offensive performance. This team is excellent in transition. They're excellent off of ball screens. They're excellent off of handoffs. They're not as efficient in isolation. That's just not the personnel that we have. And this clip here, I think, portrays that perfectly. And then those sort of possessions we had during the 9-0 run, juxtaposed with the types of possessions we had during Clemson's 10-0 run, prove it out perfectly. It was a lot of screening, ball movement, player movement, and transition in the 9-0 run. It was a lot of isolation ball and quick shots after 0 or 1 passes in the 10-0 run. So it all makes sense, and the numbers do not lie.
And we were kind of talking off camera, Brandon, about how it's this isn't an inherently selfish play by Ortega. This is the guy who's kind of been perceived as the team's best player, coming off 2 straight made baskets, thinking I can go get myself another shot, where he's just not quite to that caliber of player that maybe Ortega thinks he is. Not to say he's not a bad or a good player, because Ortega has been awesome, and I think other than maybe Lamont Butler, he's probably Kentucky's most important player right now. So, you can kind of give and take with some of these things, but like you said, it bled into the next few possessions where you just saw similar stuff where it was just slow, not as much, movement and things like that. And that really, that was something that really crept up late in that second half and kind of burned Kentucky at the end there as well. So, but you want to go ahead and move on to our third and final play here, Brandon? Or you got something else on that?
Nope, let's do it.
We'll go ahead and dive on into this. So this is our bad play, if you will. This is our extra 10% of Amari Williams play. So first of all, and this is where Brandon is going to probably go on his rant, is a Kerr passes the ball back to Amari. And you have Amari, what is he, 60 feet from the basket right now? So you've got your 7-footer essentially bringing the ball up. I understand that you maybe want to just kind of start the initiation, because Amari's the plan here is probably to just initiate with Amari initially. Like that you want him to maybe be the hub of whatever set action thing you're going to run here. But there's no reason, I guess, for him to, dribble it all the way up. Like Kerr's the point guard. The point guard should have the ball. If you still ultimately want to give it to Amari and run it that way, that's how you can start the play. But there's just not really much of a reason here for Amari to be bringing the ball up that much. And that's kind of when he does that, he has a tendency to kind of assert himself a little too much. Like the first whatever action here just doesn't really, I guess, hit the way that he wants to, or, it doesn't, whatever he sees, he's not really thinking is going to be a successful player or whatnot. So I guess this is kind of am I going to sound dumb for saying that's kind of a zoom action thing over there?
It would have been. That's what
Amari decided to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then Amari just decides to take his own 7-footer off the dribble, and he ends up dribbling the ball like Stanley Hudson from The Office. Brandon, I like Brandon's reference better. He said it was like Amari is slapping at the ball with a pool noodle. And that's really what he looks like when he's doing a lot of this. And as you see there, you've got Kobe Bryant wide open in the corner. Amari just does not find him, does not see him. And then you just end up with just bad dribbling here, where Amari just has the ball, 6 feet away from his body. And it just makes it easy to pickpocket. They've clearly scouted this out. They're converging on him quickly. They know that he's going to try and do that spin or a back down. Andrew Carr has done this a couple times as well over the last few games. And it just ends up in turnovers for Kentucky. And you what could have been a wide open three for Kobe Bray in the middle or in the corner ends up being a turnover. So Brandon, go on your rant. Tell me what you want to say.
This is what pretty much everybody in the country would just consider token pressure. Like this guy, let's see, it's number 10, Dell Jones. He's a freshman. Kirk Reese has played about 100 games. He's not trying to steal the ball. Like, just be the point guard and get down the floor. Like, this isn't a Kentucky thing. That like this is at all levels of college basketball. Point guards are now giving it up in the backcourt because they're have some token pressure and the 4-man or the 5-man's not being guarded. If I were Coach Pope, I would institute going into the Gonzaga game a hard and fast rule that only guards are allowed to dribble the ball in the backcourt. I'm done watching this happen. I don't like it. I think it leads to bad things, and I think the film would prove that because this is not the first game where Amari Williams has dribbled the ball down the court, and then because he's on to his like 8th, 9th, 10th dribble, something bad ends up happening. And Brandon Garrison
wasn't the only time in
guilty of
this
it as well.
game, even.
Correct. Yeah, it happened 2 or 3 times in this game. So that's my little backcourt rant. But that's almost a separate issue. So, but now he's having to initiate offense off of the dribble. I talked about that earlier. He's a very, very good decision maker and passer from the catch. And if Kirk Reese would have dribbled the ball down here, then he could throw it to Amari Williams right now, or maybe one more step in, and then we could get into zoom action, and Amari Williams would be initiating offense from the catch. He could take 2 dribbles into a handoff. He's awesome at that. Or let's say that somebody back cut or whatever. He's great at throwing that pass from the catch. And as Zach mentioned, yes, we're trying to get into zoom action here. Kirk Reese is setting a down screen. Like Andrew Carr could maybe back cut this. There's quite a bit of space there. Amari Williams, especially if he wasn't already dribbling, could definitely throw that pass. Or we could down screen. Andrew Carr could curl this. He might be able to get a pass there. And then if not, then Creasy could come off the handoff. There's so many different options that Amari Williams just decides to go away from, and he drives it. Now, again, hey, average Kentucky fan, I want Kobe Bryant to shoot more threes. How can we have that happen? Well, look at him. He's wide open with his hands up. We're getting help. This guy has came in to the paint, essentially. Amari Williams, it looks like, is pretty much looking at him, and he just says, no, I'm going to spin back over here. Now Andrew Carr sort of in the way because he did curl that down screen by Kirk Reese. And now we have 2 guys essentially standing on top of each other. Andrew Carr essentially brings his defender in to steal the ball from Amari Williams, and we have a turnover. So we just have far too many dribbles from our 5-man. We didn't try to run any real offense. Again, this was isolation, one-on-one basketball, as opposed to letting kind of the machine that is the Kentucky offense play. And that just happened too many times against Clemson. Like I said, this was the highest number of possessions via isolation that Kentucky had this season. This is one of them. It was a turnover. We showed that last one from Otega Oweh. That was another isolation possession. That was essentially a turnover in a really bad missed shot. So if you just let the offense run, like what do these last 2 clips have in common, Zach? The Otega Oweh clip and this clip. There were 0 passes. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess technically there's one in this one, but it was in the backcourt, so I'm not going to count it. There were 0 passes on either one of these possessions. I can about guarantee you that Kentucky's points per possession on 0 passes this year is going to be pretty darn close to 0. When they have 3, 4, 5, 6 passes, I bet it's really, really high. And that is something certainly to take away from each of these last 2 clips, but this one specifically as it pertains to Amari Williams.
So just a couple of easy ways to maybe prevent all that from happening is just A, have your point guard bring the ball up and actually initiate the action. And then B, which kind of goes back to what we showed in that first Amari clip, is just not be as aggressive. Here's another thing about post-ups. If let's say Amari wants to get a post-up, and like we've seen that when he gets inside and he has a one-on-one, it doesn't matter how big the other guy is, he can score a couple feet away from the basket. Why not just, if Amari wants to go into the post, why not just call a play for him to go into the post? I know we had the whole big picture thing of like, the whole offense in general, you want Amari to be at the top, but for maybe a handful of plays, why not just have him go on the post and then operate the offense from that way? Is that something that you think could be incorporated, or is that still kind of just counterintuitive to the way they want to run the overall offense?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think you can do some of that. Just like earlier, I was talking about, maybe one or two extra sets per half or whatever. Like, well, maybe that's one of your set plays is like a little diagonal back screen to throw it down to Amari Williams in the post to get him a catch there, as opposed to having everything out on the top of the key. Or you could run that for Andrew Carr or whoever it may be as well. So yes, I think that picking and choosing some spots to play through the post can be very effective. Now, just like I mentioned earlier, also that would require our big men to become more willing passers out of the post than what I've seen. And to me, that I don't think that's something we should really worry about, because all three of these forwards,
Good passers.
yeah, Andrew Carr, Brandon Garrison, Amari Williams, like they are good passers. They're not selfish human beings. They're not selfish basketball players. These are high assist guys that have shown that they are willing passers. I think that there's just something right now about when they catch the ball down low that they're not giving it up.
Mm.
So yeah, I think continuing to coach that and show them, some of these things on film like we're talking about. Yeah, I think that needs to be a part of the offense going forward as well.
Mark Pope said something today in his press conference that caught my eye. Yeah, I think he might have said it on his radio show last night too. But he's talking about he's really emphasizing since the Clemson loss more cutting, more movement behind, on the baseline, more cutting in general. Do you think that that maybe plays into the idea of, hey, Amari, don't run as much or don't try and initiate and dribble into the lane as much? We're going to have more cutter. Do you think maybe the reason Amari was doing more of that initiating was some of a result of just a lack of movement and cutting? So he tried to take it upon himself. And, with more cutting from his teammates, does that just kind of solve the problem in general? Because now he's got more options and he doesn't maybe feel the need as much to just kind of operate at the top there and take it himself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to like just telling him like, hey man, when you first come down the court, we don't need you to go one on one. Like we need you to initiate the offense. We need you to run the play. Like if it comes back to you at the top of the key with 8 seconds, then okay, put your head down and go try to make something happen.
Uh-huh.
But you don't need to go try to make something happen with 23 seconds on the shot clock when we haven't passed the ball yet. Like we haven't even tried to run offense, and you're breaking it off to go try to get your own. And again, it doesn't necessarily come from a selfish place. I really don't think so. But yeah, I think that's as simple as I would say it. If I was Coach Pope, I would just say, hey, like we need you to come down and initiate the offense. If the ball comes back to you later and you have a play to make the play. I trust you. But with 23 seconds on the shot clock before we've had a look, unless your guy falls down,
Mhm.
we're not driving it.
And I think against the Gonzaga game, we will just inherently see less dribbling from Amari if Pope's emphasis truly is on more cutting and things like that and more movement. I think it'll just kind of naturally at least take away maybe, let's say there was four of these dribble into post up possessions from Amari. Maybe that gets cut down to one or two in the Gonzaga game. And that, can cut away 2 turnovers a game, which can end up
Right.
being huge in a game like that. So, but we're already getting close to 30 minutes here. Let's do a very quick Gonzaga preview. We're going to do it through one angle, though. And the angle is going to be about an ankle, the angle on an ankle. And the ankle is Lamont Butler's ankle, it was like maybe a couple minutes into that second half against Clemson. It wasn't like a dirty play or anything. I think he actually scored or maybe lobbed it to somebody, to Brandon Garrison for a layup. Came down and just, we've all done it, rolled his ankle. He was hobbling a little bit. He came back into that game to end up still playing well. I think he hit a 3 on that bad ankle as well. But he was hobbling out there the whole game. Mark Pope said today that it was a little concerning to me. He said, basically, I hope he plays. We have no idea. I'm sure his ankle is like this big right now, so we'll see exactly whether or not he plays. But the question, Brandon, I have for you is, let's say Lamont Butler can't play. Let's not even do like he's half, he's 50%, he plays 16 minutes or whatever. Let's say Lamont Butler can't go. What is Kentucky's plan at point guard from there? Because Lamont Butler was the only reason Kentucky was even remotely in that game against Clemson, if we're being completely honest. Amari Williams was a big piece of it too, but I think Without Lamont, that could have been a 15-point loss. So where do you think Kentucky kind of, or Mark Pope will shift his floor general responsibilities if Lamont can't go?
So
Does
against
Travis Perry play?
against Clemson, Lamont Butler played 19 minutes. Kirk Creesa played 21. I'm not a math major, but that adds up to 40 minutes at the point guard spot.
You would be correct, sir.
I think that you pretty clearly you see that 21 minutes from Creesa that probably goes to about 30. If I had to guess, barring his own foul troubles or whatever it may be, in a perfect world, you probably get 30 minutes out of Creesa then. Then you probably piece together some other minutes from Otega Owe, handling the ball some, Jackson Robinson bringing the ball some. I mean, heck, and I'm not trying to be facetious here. We just watched Amari Williams dribble the ball down the court half the time. So, the point, like who the point guard is, in all seriousness, isn't overly important in this offense. Like the offense is run through the 5-man quite a bit. So, like, who dribbles the ball from out of bounds to the front court isn't overly important, because once you get into the half court, who the point guard is kind of goes out the window anyway within the offense. So I think that that this offense is uniquely capable of sort of surviving without a true point guard. Now, Lamont Butler brings a million other things that aren't as easy to survive, but like
great pick and roll guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the other things he brings, but like just him specifically dribbling the ball up the court, that's not as important. But yes, I would say that unless Kentucky jumps out to some, great lead or whatever, I would find it surprising if you can get through 40 minutes without giving Travis Perry a shot. Now, I think it'll be a pretty short leash. I think it'll be like a 2-minute first half rotation, and you kind of see how it goes. If he doesn't turn it over, then maybe he gets another 2 minutes in the second half. But I personally would go into the game trying not to play Travis Perry. Because A, I don't think he's ready. And B, even if he was, like, trying to find out essentially on the road at Gonzaga, I'm not sure is, the
Cutter Bowling versus
situation.
Florida was the comparison I came up with.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think you're going to ride Kirk Creesa for as many minutes as he can give you. You piece it together elsewhere, and you probably throw Travis Perry in there to see, is it deer in the headlights as soon as he goes in? Well, then get him right back out. If he can initiate some offense, great. Maybe you can steal 4 to 5 minutes with him in there. But I think, long story short, I said this on another show earlier, 2 other shows today, that any game that Kentucky has to play without Lamont Butler is not going to be something I'm super interested in. Like, you're going to be fine against the Colgates and the Browns of the world, but like, we don't have very many of those left. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to insinuate he's going to miss significant time. I have no idea. I sure as heck hope not. But like, he's really, really important to this team. And any amount of time, like, not just games, but any amount of minutes that you have to play without Lamont Butler are not as good as the ones you get to play with him. So if he doesn't play, I am much less optimistic about our chances out in Seattle. And yeah, it's an uphill battle probably either way, but it's tough sledding without Mr. Butler.
Yeah, like you said, it's not so much about who's actually, I guess, handling the ball. It's Lamont has just been so good, especially over the last couple games, at just being able to get himself to the rim. Travis Perry, as much as I love the kid, he's not as big, he's not as strong as Lamont. Gonzaga is just low. I mean, their backcourt. I mean, I can tell you right now, the backcourt's seniors. So they're 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" seniors. They're just big guys with all this experience. It just would not be fair for Travis to have anything more than a few minutes, I think, in this game. Even though I do think that long term, Travis is going to be a good player at Kentucky. This is just not. He would, especially on defense, it would just not be viable for him. But Pope has talked about. He mentioned on his radio show, I believe, talking about he's played Jackson at point guard before.
Yep.
We've seen Jackson's his floater game over the last couple games. I really think has come out, and maybe you can shift some of those Lamont pick and roll drives to maybe try and get more Jackson floaters, or however you want to try and make up for some of that lost shooting or scoring ability that Lamont does bring. But yeah, I feel confident with Otega kind of taking taking things upon himself a little bit more, as long as he's not, as we showed in one of the clips, not maybe overdoing it a little bit too much. So long, as I'll use the Brandon's phrase, long story short, if Lamont Butler is not playing, Kentucky's just going to be in a tough spot against Gonzaga because they have a very deep and talented backcourt. And you're just gonna, I think you're just gonna have to kind of hope that Kerr Kriisa really has. Well, we're going long here, Brandon, but you in particular have kind of, I wouldn't say go to bat for Kerr, but you've defended Kerr a little bit from his game against Clemson because the narrative after the game was kind of anti-Kerr and just kind of how he looked like he was. And I had a couple, like, there was the ones where he tips the ball out and stuff like that, and he falls over a lot. And it's like, man, just stay strong, stay on your feet for a little bit, and you will have a better chance of keeping the ball. Like, it was 2 possessions he gave away just because he didn't, he was playing volleyball out there. But it's not like he was some net negative the whole time he was out on the floor. So we'll close things out, Brandon. Just tell me why, give me a reason that Kerr Kriisa's 30 minutes should inspire some confidence if that's the case and Lamont Butler can't go against Gonzaga.
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, it's twofold. One, I'm going to be really surprised / disappointed if the Kerr Kriisa we've gotten through 8 games is the Kerr Kriisa we got all season. I'll just be really surprised and disappointed. Then for optimism, Kerr Kriisa was a starting point guard on an Arizona team that was a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Kerr Kriisa was a starting point guard for an Arizona team that was a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. This is a guy that hit 83s in a season as a sophomore, 83 threes in a season as a junior, 61 threes in 23 games last year in the Big 12. Like, this guy doesn't stink. He's really good, and he's been really good on teams that have won a lot of college basketball games. Like, West Virginia wasn't good last year, but those Arizona teams were really, really good, and he was a big part of it. So, like, it's not going to be new to Kerr Kriisa to be the starting point guard, at Gonzaga. That's not a new challenge for him. He's done it. He's won those sort of games. Now, has he looked like a point guard through the first 8 games that can go win at Gonzaga? No, he hasn't, quite frankly. He's played bad to this point for the most part. Now, his assist turnover ratio is still almost 4-1, which is like elite. Like that's elite. But he's 8 of 33 from 3.
No turnovers against Clemson or Duke, by the way. Just want to point that out.
Right.
And he didn't have any assists in any of those games, but he didn't turn the ball over.
Right. And ultimately, there's plenty of other guys that are turning. Amari Williams turned it over 4 times. Like, hey, that's why that's part of why I'm saying I'm going to get all fired up again. Like, Kerr, bring the darn ball up the court. Like, you're the point guard. Like, just dribble the ball up the court. But he's going to start shooting the ball. He's not going to shoot 24% from 3 this year. If he does, I'll eat my hat on Zoom action at the end of the season. Like, it ain't going to happen.
Clip that, chat.
But yeah, it's just not going to happen. So, is this the game where we kind of rally the troops and all of a sudden we get 17 points and 5 threes out of Kerr Kriisa and he's talking all kinds of smack to the fans? Like, I'd be here for it. Wouldn't that be fun?
I would love that. Honestly, that's best case scenario.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have a better Kerr game. He kind of is almost, and look, none of this matters if Lamont plays. Like, and Brandon is kind of on the, maybe he doesn't play. I'm kind of on I think he gives it a go. And that's no sources or anything. That's just us wanting to kind of speak things into existence. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so if he doesn't play, Kerr's going to have to step up and play well. I think he ends up doing that if that's the case. But we've been rambling on too long. This episode went longer than we thought, but I hope it was a good one. It sounded like it was a good one from my perspective. I think we waited a little bit too long maybe to get from our last episode to this one, but no one wants to break down mid-majors anymore. We're having fun with the good stuff. So we'll do another one here in the next however many games. Definitely one. When's that Louisville game? Actually,
December 14th.
December 14th. So maybe we'll try and get one in before that and preview then. So, but otherwise, if not, we'll see you after that Louisville game for sure. We'll definitely do one after that. But this has been another episode of Zoom Action. We'll see y'all later.
See ya.